Before the morning sun ever touched the fields of Briar Ridge, before the workers were pushed into the rows with aching backs and blistered hands, there walked a man whose very name caused stomachs to tighten and hearts to pound. Elias Granger, the overseer. A man carved out of iron and cold wind. His shadow stretched long over the plantation, and wherever it touched, dread seemed to follow. People said he was born mean. Others swore he learned cruelty as easily as breathing. But what everyone agreed on was this: Elias Granger had no mercy. His steps cracked like whips across the dirt, and his silence was often worse than his voice. There was something in his eyes, quiet, calculating, and empty, that made even the bravest worker lower their gaze. For years he ruled the fields with harsh hands and a harder heart. He punished without hesitation and worked people until their bodies trembled. He believed fear was the only thing that kept order, and he spread it like sickness. No one dared defy him. No one dared speak his name after dark. But power has a way of rotting from the inside. And beneath Elias Granger's stern exterior, something had already begun to crumble. A small crack. A quiet tremor. Something he tried to drown beneath whiskey and rage. Something that visited him long before he would ever admit it. The first night it happened, Elias felt the cold before he heard the whisper. He had been drifting between waking and sleep, the kind of half-conscious haze where the room around you still exists, but something else begins to bleed in from beyond it. He lay there heavy-eyed, listening to the faint creaking of his cabin. Then, footsteps. Slow. Unmistakable. Crossing the wooden floor. Elias sat up fast, reaching for the lantern on the table beside him. It flickered weakly, trembling as though shaken by an unseen hand. He scanned the room, the walls, the corners, the doorway, and found nothing. But he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had stood near him. Someone close enough to touch his shoulder. Over the next nights it grew worse. The footsteps returned. The whispers crept closer. And sometimes, when Elias tried to fall asleep, he felt a weight settle onto the edge of his bed as though something, had just sat beside him. He would bolt upright, drenched in sweat, breath shallow, whipping his head around, desperate for any sign he was not losing his mind. But that was only the beginning. Because soon the night stopped being silent. Faces began appearing in the corners of his dreams, faces of people he recognized, faces of those he had punished, faces of those who had stood trembling beneath his command. Their eyes stared at him with a quiet, unbearable heaviness. And every time he tried to look away, they moved closer. Elias told no one. He refused to admit fear. During the day he tried to act as he always had, harsh, firm, unshaken. But the people who worked the field saw the change. Saw his hands tremble when he thought no one watched. Saw him look over his shoulder as if followed. They didn't know the details. But they could sense something had changed. The man they feared, now feared something himself. And as the days stretched into nights, and the nights stretched into something darker, the plantation began to feel charged with a quiet energy. Like the air held a secret. Like the soil remembered more than the living wanted to believe. Elias Granger had spent years breaking others. Now something was beginning to break him. Sleep became a battlefield he could no longer win. Every time he closed his eyes, the world of the living dissolved, and he found himself standing in the same endless field. A field with no horizon, no sun, no moon. The cotton glowed faintly, shimmering like pale ghosts drifting in the wind. And there, surrounded by silence, Elias walked with a sense of dread he had never known. The footsteps always began behind him. Light, dragging, the sound of someone too tired to lift their feet. At first he tried ignoring them. Then he tried walking faster. Then running. But no matter how far he fled, the footsteps remained behind him. Slow, deliberate, patient. Eventually he turned. That's when he saw them. A line of figures standing far down the row. Shadows shaped like people. Still. Watching. Not moving. Not speaking. Their presence pressed against him like a weight, crushing the breath from his lungs. He would wake gasping, clawing at his throat, convinced he was suffocating. The lantern beside him burned low, its flame shaking as though it too feared the dark. Every night after that, the figures came closer. What began as silhouettes became recognizable faces. The boy with the scar on his cheek. The woman with trembling hands. The man who had collapsed beneath a punishing sun. These were not strangers. Elias remembered every one of them. He remembered the things he had done. He remembered the sound of sobs, the cracking of wood against skin, the look of resignation in eyes that had nothing left to give. Now those eyes watched him from the dream field. Closely. Intensely. Without blinking. During the day he grew weaker. His steps slowed. He stumbled. Workers whispered as he passed, noticing how gaunt he had become, how hollow his voice sounded. Elias began mumbling under his breath, muttering apologies to people who were not there. He jumped at sudden sounds, flinched at shadows, scanned the tree line as though expecting someone to emerge. The nights followed him into the daylight. Sometimes he'd stop mid-stride, frozen, squinting toward something only he could see. Later, he admitted to no one that he sometimes glimpsed faces in the windows of abandoned cabins. That he saw figures darting behind trees. That he felt cold fingertips brush the back of his neck while his back was turned. The people working the fields noticed lanterns burning in his cabin long after midnight. They saw the light flicker wildly as though someone inside was pacing. Some swore they heard him scream raw, guttural screams that pierced the stillness of the night. Others said they heard multiple voices inside, although only Elias lived there. By now, the overseer rarely slept more than minutes at a time. But each time he drifted, the dream field claimed him again. The figures now stood only a few feet away, close enough for him to see their expressions. Sadness, sorrow, and something deeper, something colder. One night, one of them finally spoke. A voice Elias recognized instantly. A voice he had silenced years ago. "Do you remember me?" Elias woke with a cry that echoed through the cabin. He knocked over the lantern, scrambling across the floor, clawing at the dirt as though trying to dig his way out. His heart pounded so violently he thought it would burst. The fear had grown too sharp, too real. He no longer feared sleep. He feared waking. Because the boundary between nightmare and reality had begun to dissolve. And on the horizon of his unraveling mind, something far worse waited. As weeks passed, Elias's descent became impossible to hide. The once revered overseer now wandered the plantation like a man lost between worlds. His boots dragged through the dirt. His shirt clung to his thin frame. His eyes darted, wild and haunted, as if he was constantly searching for something just beyond sight. The workers avoided him, not out of fear but out of unease. The man who had once held power now seemed ruled by a terror deeper than anything they had ever seen. Children whispered that he talked to invisible people. Adults said they sometimes heard him begging softly, voice cracking, pleading with someone they couldn't see. Elias began avoiding the cabin altogether. He tried sleeping in the barn, then in the fields, then beneath trees. But the nightmares followed wherever he went. He swore the figures stood around him when he woke outside. He swore he felt cold breath against his ear. He swore that when he turned sharply, he caught glimpses of pale hands retreating into the shadows. He stopped eating, stopped shaving, stopped caring for anything other than surviving the next hour, and the next and the next. His mind fractured into pieces too small to hold together, his thoughts chasing each other in frantic circles. One morning, the plantation owner found him crouched behind the barn, rocking back and forth, muttering a single sentence. "They won't let me sleep. They won't let me sleep." His voice was thin, broken, barely human. When the owner reached out to steady him, Elias recoiled violently, screaming as though burned. He begged not to be taken indoors. He said the walls whispered. He said the windows watched. He said the shadows grew faces now. The master attempted to bring him food, water, anything, but Elias refused both, insisting they were trying to poison him into the dark. The workers exchanged uneasy looks. They knew madness when they saw it. But this felt different. As though something invisible had reached into the overseer's mind and taken hold. Then came the final night. For reasons no one understood, Elias returned to his cabin. Perhaps he was too tired to run anymore. Perhaps he thought he could defeat the nightmares by facing them head-on. Perhaps some deeper instinct pulled him there, some part of him that knew what was coming. He locked the door, bolted the windows, pushed furniture against the walls, sealing every crack. Lanterns burned so bright they filled the cabin with a hot, trembling glow. Then, silence. Hours passed. Dawn crept slowly toward the horizon. And then, the first scream shattered the stillness. A scream filled with pure terror. A scream that tore from the depths of a man finally confronting everything he had buried. The workers gathered outside but did not dare approach. The screams rose, fell, rose again. Elias shouted names no one recognized. He apologized to people who were not there. He cried out for mercy, voice breaking, words dissolving into ragged sobs. And then, silence. When the door was finally forced open, the lanterns were still burning. The flames steady. The room undisturbed. And Elias Granger sat in the corner, back straight, hands resting limply at his sides. His eyes were wide, staring at something the living could not see. His mouth hung open as though caught mid-breath. But no breath came. He was gone. No marks. No struggle. No sign of violence. Just pure, frozen terror. A man who had spent his life breaking others, finally confronted by everything he had tried to ignore. After his death, the plantation changed. The air felt lighter in some places, heavier in others. People said they heard footsteps around Elias's old cabin long after it was emptied. Some claimed lanterns flickered whenever his name was spoken. Others whispered that on certain nights, just before dawn, a faint voice could be heard repeating the same phrase he had murmured before losing his mind. "They won't let me sleep." But it wasn't fear the workers felt now. It was justice. A quiet, unseen justice that the world rarely offered the powerless. Elias Granger became a story. A warning. A reminder carved into memory that cruelty does not vanish. It lingers. It echoes. It waits. And one day it returns to the one who cast it into the world. History is full of wounds, deep ones, that still ache generations later. But stories like Elias's remind us of something crucial. No one escapes the weight of their own deeds. Not truly. Not forever. Sooner or later, every shadow reveals what it holds. And so, if you are listening to this now, carry this story with you. Let it remind you of the lives that were shaped by suffering, of the cost of cruelty, and of the truth that no darkness ever stays hidden. If you found this story powerful, if it stirred something in you or opened your eyes to the echoes of the past, then I invite you to stay with this channel. Subscribe. Share this story. Help breathe life into the truths that were forgotten, buried, or deliberately erased. Your support helps uncover more voices lost to history, more tales of struggle, more stories that must be told. Because remembering is the first step in healing. And telling the truth is how we keep the past from repeating. More stories await. More voices call out. And together, we can ensure they are never silenced again. And before you go, I want to speak to you directly. This channel, Hidden Tales, exists for one purpose: to bring light to the stories the world tried to bury. Stories of courage, survival, injustice, and the long shadows history leaves behind. If you want to be part of preserving these forgotten voices, if you believe their stories deserve to be heard, then your presence here matters more than you know. So take a moment. Hit the subscribe button. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of the past the world tried to silence. Leave a comment. Tell us what moved you, what shocked you, what you want to uncover next. And if this story resonated with you, share it. You never know whose perspective it may change. Together, we can build a community that listens, remembers, and refuses to look away. A community that uncovers what was lost and protects what must never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And welcome to Hidden Tales, where the voices of the past finally speak again.